Okay, I think it's 11 o'clock. Can get started. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another discussion for our diversity challenge this semester. Our topic today is hate crimes, and we are really honored and delighted to have our Chief of Police, Mr. Allan Wilmore, to facilitate this discussion for us. Welcome. Thank you very much. You can take over.
I'm glad to be here. So I'm glad to be here, like I said, and what I would like to do is basically just kind of do a quick overview of what hate crimes are, things like that. I'd like to talk about a couple incidences that I found that I thought were interesting and wanted to talk about them, just kind of facilitate some discussion, and then open it up for questions and see if anybody has any questions on what a hate crime is or how better to report it or things like that. So I'm going to start sharing the screen right now. So Toyin, am I now sharing the screen?
Yes, yes, I can see.
All right, so sorry, I have to wear my glasses here. So what I'd like to do again is basically look at the Illinois law governing hate crimes, and then also talk about bias motivated crime and identify bias motivated incidences. And then again, like I said, I wanted to facilitate a discussion on what we can do about that thing. Just a little bit about myself so that you understand where I'm coming from and who I am. My name is Allan Wilmore, Marion Allan Wilmore. I was actually raised in this area, grew up in West Frankfort, graduated high school, West Frankfort High School. I actually attended right here at Johnny Logan Community College, where I received my associates. While I was here, I was on the Student Senate, and the second year I was here, I was the Student Senate President. After I graduated from here, I went to Southern Illinois University Police Department, where I received 2 bachelor's degrees, one in psychology and one in administration of justice. After I graduated from there, I began working with the City of Carbondale Police Department. I worked there for 8.5 years, during which time I did many things, was on the SWAT team, did some investigations. One of the bigger things I did, I was an FTO, field training officer, bicycle officer, housing officer, but I ended as the crime scene specialist for the department, meaning that I handled all the major crime scenes that happened in the city of Carbondale. After that, 8.5 years there, I went to Southern Illinois University, began working with them. While I was there, I got promoted to sergeant. I worked with an FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, was on their bicycle team and evidence response team, that kind of stuff and everything. And then most recently, after about 19 years at SIU, I came here in the middle of May of this year to take the chief of police job here. So that's a little background on myself, but let's move right into the PowerPoint here. So hate crimes. So the definition for the state of Illinois of what a hate crime is that a person commits a hate crime when by reason of actual or perceived race, color, creed, religion, ancestry, gender, sexual orientation, physical or mental disability, or national origin of another individual or group of individuals, and regardless of any existence of other motivating factors, he or she commits assault, battery, aggravated assault, intimidation, stalking, cyber stalking, misdemeanor theft, criminal trespass to residence, misdemeanor criminal damage to property, criminal trespass to vehicle, criminal trespass to real property, mob action, disorderly conduct, transmission of obscene messages, harassment by telephone, or harassment through other electronic communications. And that is a mouthful. So really, when we're looking at that, what we want to look at specifically is that it is a crime that is committed. So there has to be a criminal element to it. And then there has to be a protected group that crime is the target of that crime. So without those 2 elements in there, it won't count as a hate crime. Continuing the definition, understand that the violation of this code is a class 4 felony. But if this event occurs in a certain location, it bumps that up or aggravates that to a higher felony level, class 3 or class 2, if it's a second or subsequent offense. And some of those areas are, like in this definition that I've just pulled up, is that If it happens on the church grounds, building, mosque, structure, someplace identified for or associated with a particular religion, then that's an aggravating factor. If it happens in a cemetery, mortuary, or a place where for burial or memorializing the dead, again, it aggravates it. Or if it happened right here at John A. Logan or at SIU or any other school, that is also an aggravating factor. And I didn't have enough space, but there's actually one more. If it's a public park or ethnic religious community center. And then there's actually more on top of that I couldn't squeeze in there, that if it's within 1,000 feet of, so say it happened on the roadway out in front of John A., which is not technically John A. property, if it's within 1,000 feet on that public roadway, that's considered an aggravating factor. So again, it's a mouthful and there's a lot of words in there, but like I said, if we kind of condense it down and look at, is there a targeted group and did a crime occur, then we can understand that. I don't think I'm advancing. Are you guys, is the screen advancing or not? There we go.
Yes, it is. It is advancing.
So what slide are you guys seeing right now?
Overview.
Okay, so this is what I was talking about. Sorry about that. Let me put that up there. That's what I went through and read earlier. Sorry, and I was advancing it over here on my side, but it wasn't advancing on your side. So I apologize for that. So again, that's what it is. That's what the definition of, and like I said, you guys can look that up. So then again, like I talked about, location of the crime will also aggravate that and make it go from a class 4 felony all the way up to class 3 felony. And then again, if it's a second or subsequent offense, it'll move it up to a class 2 felony. So, so some key points to look at while we're doing this is that it's perceived race. Trying to move some stuff around here. There's my pointer. All right. So main motivation of the crime is the identity of the victim. Okay. The suspect just has to believe that that person is falls in one of those protected groups. And then the victim does not actually have to belong to one of those protected groups. We see that happening where a subject will be exiting a bar that is frequented by homosexuals or people of, that identify with a different gender, things like that. And that person may be just a friend who's coming out of the bar, but they're attacked because they're perceived to be part of that class. And then the last part is, regardless of any other motivating factor or factors, the purpose might be robbery, where the person is really just intent on taking this person's property, but they also have a dislike for something. So in the eyes of the law, that there's no mitigating circumstance saying, well, I was just really after his property. It says that if it falls into the categories of a hate crime, then the hate crime statute will trump anything else with that. Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's move forward here. All right. So from a law enforcement point of view, what do we need to know in terms of investigating these type of things? Okay. Successful implementation of it is protecting people's rights. Everybody, in the United States, we have the Constitution. The Constitution is a guarantee of everybody's rights. And we have to be able to recognize elements of hate crimes to help us identify other factors which can cause and develop prosecute cases. Proper identification of biased crimes results in accurate reporting and more effective prosecution. So when we talk about hate crimes, the reason we investigate hate crimes so seriously, the reason that we have hate crime laws to begin with is because of something called the brush fire effect. And basically, when a hate crime happens, it not only impacts the victim of that crime, it can impact a group of people, the people that live in that neighborhood. It can impact the entire state. It can even impact the entire nation, depending on the crime and the circumstances. So it's something that can flare up into something a lot bigger than just what happened, the actual details of that incident. So that's why, as a law enforcement professional, we have to take hate crimes seriously, and we have to investigate them vigorously, effectively, quickly, and try to do as much as we can to try to tamp those things down. So here's some statistics from the Department of Justice on Illinois' hate crime. Just so you can see, in 2019, crimes against persons constitute the majority of the types of crimes, those 85. And when I talk about crimes against persons, crimes against property, and crimes against society, what I'm talking about, excuse me, is crimes against persons would be battery, some kind of assault, things like that, that the victim is the crime, the victim has been attacked in some way, shape, or form. Crimes against property, what I would be talking about is graffiti, vandalism, arson, things like that, where the property was taken from the person or damaged in some way, shape, or form. And then crimes against society are the other types of crimes that kind of don't fall into the other two, so they're more general. Looking at the bias motivation categories, race, ethnicity, ancestry is predominantly the reason that they have found for these crimes, and followed real closely by sexual orientation. And then you can see religion, and then gender identity was the least one, at least in Illinois, okay? So let's move on down here. So then you can go back 3 years, 2017, 2018, and 2019, and compare the numbers. And obviously 2018 was a lot bigger year for Illinois, with 108 incidences reported. 2019, that dropped to 66. Again, we won't have 2020 or 21. It usually takes a couple of years before we can get the data in and everything. One quick thing that I wanted to say about how this is reported too is that according to the FBI, most people believe that the crimes are underreported. So let's see here. Where am I at? So it's estimated that there are 250,000 hate crimes that are committed each and every year, okay? From about 2004 to say 2015, this is what the feds think. And they say the majority of these incidences are not reported to law enforcement. And so I think as law enforcement, we need to do a better job of trying to encourage people to report, because the more people report, even if something doesn't happen in the court system with it, even if, say, the state's attorney decides not to file with it, at least we've made the public aware of the incident. Law enforcement is now aware of the incident, so we can monitor that incident more closely and make sure that something doesn't happen. For civil cases, again, by reporting the incident, what happens is you'll find other people that they say, well, I wasn't going to report it because I didn't think anything would happen, but since you reported it, I'm going to go ahead and report it. And so we get a better idea of the scope of the crime and make sure that we understand what is actually going on out there. The stats you guys are seeing here, you understand that this is a voluntary program that police departments have with the federal government. They are not under an obligation to report their crimes, any crimes actually, to the feds. And to complicate things even worse is that the Uniform Crime Reporting Program is actually undergoing a significant change in that they're moving from what was called the summary report system to a thing called NIBRS, which is a National Incident-Based Reporting System. And so that transition took place last year and this year. This year was the first time that we actually went to this. And the reason for doing this is quick history. So the summary reporting system, basically what it does is, so if you had a murder and you had a theft and burglary, and then a vehicle burglary or vehicle theft. So some guy kills somebody, takes a bunch of their property, and then takes their car and drives away. Under summary suspension, you would report the murder to the feds, but those other crimes would be included into it, but they wouldn't necessarily get reported or documented in terms of stats and things like that. Under NIBRS now, each of those incidences would be reported out as a separate crime. And so there were a lot of police chiefs, a lot of campus police directors and things like that that were really concerned, because it's going to make it look like crime has significantly increased everywhere. But in reality, what's happening is we're just getting a better understanding of reporting. So we're actually reporting better on the incidents that did happen, because there'll be multiple crimes in one incident. But again, under summary suspension or summary reporting system, it will only there was a hierarchy and only the most serious crime was reported, whereas the other crimes were just kind of included into it. Okay. Again, if anybody had any questions about that, we can talk more a little bit about that, but I'm going to digress and run down rabbit holes if I'm not careful. So we'll just kind of move on. Okay. But again, the program is a voluntary program that police departments, really the only thing that they will lose if they don't participate in the program is federal funding. So like if they participate in the Cops Fast grant, which is a grant to hire police officers and pays for part of their salary for a few years, or if they participate in the ballistic vest program, where the federal government pays for half the cost of ballistic vests for officers and things like that, they would find themselves ineligible if they didn't comply and submit crime stats for their area. But if they don't receive any federal funding or don't need any federal funding, things like that, they don't necessarily have to report. So again, there's always some question about whether or not we're actually getting data that is accurate and representative of what the problem is. So, but, all right. So again, those were the numbers from 2017, 2018, 2019. And if you want more information, you can click on the site there for the justice.gov hate crimes and hate crime statistics, and you can find out the hate crime statistics that are being reported from every state. I just pulled Illinois because that's where we live. So anyway, identifying bias motivated crime. So bias motivated incidences. I put this in here too because people will do things and there's an initial thought that, oh, this is a crime, they can't do this. We always have to be careful because the First Amendment gives us the right to free speech. And even though there are things that will, that we don't like and that, people can do, basically, unless there's a crime involved in it. So we have to be careful and walk that line as police officers. So if the Ku Klux Klan decided they wanted to do a march down the middle of the road, even though I don't agree with what they believe in and everything like that, under the First Amendment, they have the right to express their views in a public way as long as they don't commit any crimes. Okay. Bias motivated incidents are non-criminal conduct, which is motivated by hatred, prejudice, bigotry, is directed towards individual residents, houses of worship, things like that. They're not considered a crime again, but they're something that we as law enforcement can monitor because their bias motivated incidences can lead to crimes. And so if we're not aware that these things are going on, we don't have an accurate picture of our jurisdiction. Okay. So let's move on. So again, I talked a little bit about that. Hate speech, could be something like handing out flyers in a public place, posting hateful material that doesn't do any damage, things like that. So again, the Supreme Court has said that there are certain kinds of speech that are protected, then there are certain kinds of speech that are not protected. Okay. But again, like I said, if law enforcement and authorities aren't aware that these incidents are occurring, then I don't think that we're properly able to monitor the scope of the problem and see if there's anything that could rise out of those things. So again, that's kind of what we've been talking about the whole time. Freedom of speech versus a crime. Just because, like I said, there's things happen, true threat, serious expression with intent to commit violence against a group, that would be a crime, okay? So not all speech is protected. Some speech is criminal. The example they always use is yelling fire in a movie theater. That's not free speech, okay? So if we're looking at this and we're going to figure out, so is this incident a hate crime or is it just a bias incident that is not a crime, okay? We're going to look at statements made by the offender and what they said. We're going to look at the main motivation of the crime, whether or not it was biased, if the crime was committed. Bias statements alone can't be used to classify an offense as crime. It's more important to determine the motivation behind the statements, including how these statements define the events of the incident. Okay, just the presence of a symbol or word does not necessarily, again, make it a crime, but presence that are inflammatory and well known, a swastika, a noose, other kinds of graffiti, vandalism, things like that, We'll also look at the patterns of the victimization and see if this was really targeted towards a certain group of people, again, or was it more generalized? And then, of course, literature, if we see literature laying around, hate literature, things like that. And is it on the suspect's person? How, was he in possession of it? Things like that. So then, of course, we're going to look at the date, time, circumstances of the occurrence. If this incident occurred on a religious holiday or an event where a gathering of people that were all of one ethnic group or one group, we're going to look at those type of things. The location is one of the big things we'll look at. Again, if it happened at a mosque or at a religious center or even a public place like a Holiday Inn banquet room, if that room was being rented by or used by a group, a protected group, and the event occurred, then it could possibly be considered a hate crime. And then what's the proximity? Is it close to an established place like a community center or house of worship? So we're going to look at all those type of things to see whether or not those things are fall into the category of a hate crime. Lastly, the victim's perception. Did the victim perceive that they were selected because they were identifiable group? And so we're going to take all these elements, okay, or all these details of the event, and we're going to put them together and then build a picture for the state's attorney or whoever's going to prosecute the case to determine whether or not, yes, this is a hate crime, or no, this is not a hate crime. Again, like I said, when I was in one of the many law classes that I've been to about search and seizure and probable cause and things like that. So I'm at the border, Texas border, and I see a vehicle being driven by somebody driving down the road. Well, I can't just stop that vehicle because they haven't done anything, but say the person's acting real suspicious, refuses to make eye contact, they continue driving, the kids in the back seat wave, but it's a really mechanical wave, like a robot waving. There's nobody else out in this area. There's no reason for them to be out in this area. The time of day is not right. It's like the middle of the night, that kind of thing. So what's this person doing driving around the middle of the night with their kids and everything like this? This is an actual case that went to the Supreme Court where an officer stopped a van like this, and turned out that there was a lot of drugs hidden in the van. But all those little elements of the way the kids waved and the way the person was driving, the time of day and all this stuff, all those elements made enough probable cause for the person to stop the, that's my phone ringing. Sorry about that. But okay. That's, so all those elements make up what determined to be probable cause for the arrest and the stop and everything like that. Same thing here. We're going to take all those incidents, all those little details of the crime, and we're going to look at them and build a case to say, yes, this is a hate crime, or no, this is not a hate crime. Okay. So then you also see about identity-oriented phrases, things like that. Identity-oriented phrases do not automatically make an offense a hate crime, but the absence of the identity-oriented phrases do not necessarily mean that the offense was not a hate crime. Okay, so again, it's the totality of the circumstances is what we're looking for, and so we're just walking through. So consider this: a guy's at a bar, he sees his girlfriend talking to another guy. So of course, the first guy goes up to the second guy and calls him a derogatory name for a gay male and punches him in the face. Okay, is that a hate crime? Maybe, maybe not, but probably not, in the eyes of the law, because if the only factor there was his statement, then we don't have enough to maybe push forward to that level to consider that a hate crime. Excuse me. So we have to know, if law enforcement personnel determine that the motivation for the assault was just jealousy, then it's not a hate crime, So again, we're going to take a hard look at these things, and as police officers, we're going to try to gather details about what happened up to that incident to make that determination. Okay. 3 questions to determine if an incident is a hate crime, and it has to be yes to all 3 again for us to charge somebody with a hate crime. First thing is the act of crime. Okay, the very first element is we have to have some kind of crime that is committed some way, shape, or form. And then the second is that, is there evidence the crime could be identity motivated. And if we have that, and then the third one is, do we have enough evidence supportive of the whole or substantial identity motivation? Okay. And if we don't have any one of those three, you will not see that incident prosecuted as a hate crime. The police will still investigate it as a hate crime. They may charge the person with a crime or something like that. It may be highly suspected that this was a hate crime. But again, that's the issue we get into with law enforcement is that we investigate the crimes, we submit it to the state's attorney's office, and then the state's attorney decides, we're not going to file on that. So that happens more often than not. And it's nothing against the state's attorney. The state's attorney has a burden, a level of evidence that they need to successfully prosecute a crime. And if they don't have that, they don't have it. And again, if we investigate it, we've done our due diligence and we've done everything we can to investigate an incident, but we just don't have that level. It's not at fault, and we're not pointing fingers at anybody. It just simply is what it is. Okay. Okay. So another question we can ask when we're looking at this is, would the incident have occurred if the victim or offender were part of the same group? Okay. It's helpful if the victim and offender are not part of the same group. But then again, like I said, it's not always helpful because a hate crime directed an individual or group because of his or her association or advocacy on behalf of a member of a protected group. They could be attacked for that. That's still a hate crime. Again, but it just how we document, how we investigate this type of incident is very critical. Okay.
Yeah.
Documenting of a hate crime. Again, when we're completing a report, we're going to do a standard incident report, hate crime. We're going to try to put in all the elements of the offense. Again, we're going to talk about, and again, the hate crime is elevating the charge. It is an aggravating factor for that. Provide victim offender demographics, indicate the motivation bias, and that's actually something for reporting it into the database, the state database. So anyway, and this is how we submit it up to the UCR and everything like that. So we can kind of skip that one and move on. So again, in terms of hate crimes, what we have is, it's an aggravating factor. Okay. And so I've heard it myself. People have asked me, they say, well, why do we need hate crimes? A crime is a crime. We should be charging people with a crime, not necessarily hate crimes because they're just a protected group. Well, if they actually looked at the law, they would see that there are aggravating things for other things. We have aggravating things as a police officer. If I'm in uniform and somebody attacks me, that is an aggravating factor. So if they commit a battery on a normal person, that's a one level, but then it makes it ups the penalty by one level if I'm a police officer doing my job. Same thing with judges or postal workers or firefighters. There's all kinds of different categories of people that are, if they are attacked or crime is committed against them, that aggravates them. Our senior citizens are one. So if a person over the age of 65 has a crime committed against them, it's an aggravating factor. And we do that because we understand that crimes against the elderly are, serious, and we want to protect our senior citizens and things like that. So we've put that into law. Okay. And so again, if you have any questions, my name and number are there, and my email address is up there. Feel free to write that down, shoot me a question, come by the police department and talk with me. I just kind of wanted to close out with something that I saw. William Watkinson said in a sermon in 1907 that denunciatory rhetoric is so much easier and cheaper than good works and provides a popular temptation, yet it's far better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. And I know that phrase is usually attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, but I actually did some research, and William Watkinson said a long time before she did. But anyway, we all have a part to play when it comes to preventing hate crimes and investigating hate crimes and things like that. And so it's incumbent upon us to do our due diligence, whether it's to encourage somebody to make a report and be supportive of that person, or from where I'm at, make sure that my officers understand what a hate crime is and how we need to go about investigating that, to making sure that the state's attorney understands that, things like that. But we all play a part and a role in this. And it's together that we'll get rid of the darkness and light candles. So questions, comments, and concerns?
Wow, thank you so much. That was great. Thank you, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, you mentioned something with regard to like uh, the location. You said about 1,000 feet from like
Yes.
our campus.
Mhm.
Could you explain that again quickly?
Okay. So the aggravating factor, okay, is that if it happens in certain locations, and then one of the very last ones, I think it's like number 5 on the Illinois code side, is that if it happens within 1,000 feet of one of those places on a public way. So if you think about how you have a street and you have sidewalks and things like that, so if it happened on the sidewalk across the street from a church, okay, so that means the person's probably parked their car and they're on their way to church or whatever,
Okay.
and that person is attacked because of their affiliation and they're a protected class, and it is determined that that was a hate crime because of that person's, they're in one of the protected classes, then that's what we're talking about.
Okay, okay, thank you. I get that. I was going to ask about how you determine the police force determine the difference between hate crime and hate incident, because sometimes when I get complaints from people about somebody doing something, so there was a time somebody was really upset that a group of students were calling her Wakanda. You know, you remember the movie Black Panther and Wakanda, and yeah, and she was concerned that they are being racist and hateful, and it's an hate crime or hate incident. So, I started to think about, how do we know if it's hate?
Right.
And it's interesting that you mentioned jealousy also, because this girl was in the same class with this group of students.
Right.
So how do you determine when it's jealousy and when it's a hate incident, and when, I can understand when it's a crime.
Right.
So how do you differentiate between?
There was an example, and I saw this. My wife actually showed me a TikTok video, and I'm sure that you guys are well aware of it. But I'm going to try to find the incident here where I'm going to slide you over here and bring this down. So it happened in Virginia Beach, and it was on CNN, where there was a person moved into a house in Virginia Beach, and her neighbor started, basically they had set up a system where they had motion sensors, and every time this family went in or out of their driveway, it played blaring music. They started playing racial slurs, monkey sounds, things like that. Are you guys familiar with the incident? Are you familiar with that incident? So again, this happened in Virginia Beach. So they called the police, and the police in Virginia Beach stated that it didn't rise to the level that Virginia law determines as criminal behavior. Okay. Now, I did some research, and this is just me because I'm curious. So I pulled up Virginia code on noise ordinance. And so based on what I saw, because the videotape I saw, it was nighttime. Based on what I saw, if that noise is audible, like I want to say it was 65 decibels, but after the hours of 10 p.m., then that's actually a crime. It's a violation of city ordinance for noise violation. And it's very simple. Oh, that person, and whether, I think back to say, okay, take out all the racial or, elements of the crime and just look at it. Is it a crime? So if this person pulls in their driveway and they pull in their driveway and it's after 10 p.m. and their neighbor has set up this system that will blare noise, that is over the decibel limit, then it's a crime, period. It's that simple. And in my mind, and so I also said, okay, what happened if this incident happened in Illinois? Okay, well, there's a couple things that could happen. One, if it was in the city of Carbondale, which of course I worked there for many years, they also have an amplified sound statute. And I've wrote many tickets for violation of the amplified sound statute, meaning that after the hours of 10 p.m., so 10 p.m. to about 10 a.m., it's 50 feet. if I can hear that over 50 feet away, which I mean, and the person you could see from the driveway again, it looked like they were at least more than that away from that house. It's a violation, period. And then on top of that, then if you look back, remember I read through all the different violations for the hate crime in Illinois. One of the very small ones, very small words, was disorderly conduct. Okay. Now, disorderly conduct by itself under Illinois law is something that alarms and disturbs somebody. Okay. Well, that obviously would alarm and disturb me. I'm sure it would alarm and disturb them. That's why they call the police. And I don't think it would be unreasonable, again, in Illinois, to say that that is disorderly conduct. And so then I think that if the police done a proper investigation of that incident, recorded it, listened to it, talk to the victims, again, what I talked about, totality of circumstances. What did the victim perceive that they were a victim of this crime because of their ethnicity? Yeah, they did. Is there evidence that it is, motivated by bias? Yes, it is. The monkey sounds and the derogatory language that is used in it. I mean, it's a slam dunk case in Illinois that is a violation of Illinois hate crime law, and they would be charged with that. And here's the interesting part. So disorderly conduct is a Class C misdemeanor in Illinois. Okay, so that is like the lowest of the low that you can get in terms of a misdemeanor crime in Illinois. So because that person would, added all that other stuff to it, like I say, if this happened in Illinois, that would be a Class 4 felony that person committed, meaning that, and for those of you who don't understand, misdemeanor means it's punishable by up to $1,000 fine and up to a year in jail, in the county jail. Okay. Felonies are punishable by over a year in prison and much higher fines and things like that. Okay. So, but that disorderly conduct now is elevated from a Class C misdemeanor up to a Class 4 felony. So,
wow. Thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful. And you also talked about crimes, different kinds of crimes against persons, property, and society. And when I look at the statistics, I saw that for Illinois, crimes against the society is 0%. I know you showed a number of statistics, but there was one that just shows 0.
Right.
So could you give an example of a crime against society and why is it 0, really? I mean,
again, crimes against society would be, let's see here. So crimes against persons, again, are like murder, rape, assault, things like that. Crimes against property, robbery, bribery, burglary, auto theft, obtaining monies against, like defrauding people out of their money and things like that. So crimes against society would be gambling, prostitution, drug violations, society's prohibition against certain types of activities, those things, they would consider victimless crimes. Okay. So when we say crimes against society, that's what we're talking about. So some of those would not necessarily fall into the hate crime statute. And if you look, like say the Illinois definition of hate crime, again, it doesn't necessarily lend itself to crimes against society. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm just wondering why it's a 0% in.
Again, like I said, I'm trying to think of a way that you could have a hate crime with one of those types of crimes against society. From what I mentioned, gambling, prostitution, like I say, drug violations. Those would be, they don't necessarily lend themselves to fall into hate crimes. So that's why you would see that as a 0, because the feds, again, the feds have broke this down into those 3 categories. It's part of their reporting requirements. So, okay.
Yes. Thanks. That's the questions that I was going to ask. It's really, really interesting to see that almost all the characteristics of the hate crime it's got identity in it, identity motivated, protected group identity and all that.
And I think that
So-
part of that has to do with the fact that I think that we're seeing an evolution of hate crime in our understanding of hate crime. I think that for the most part, when people look at hate crimes or we talk about hate crimes, I think we have a stereotype. What is a hate crime? Well, a stereotype would be the Ku Klux Klan, attacking African American, or the person attacking the homosexual person, or the Jewish person being attacked because of their religion. So those are usually the big three that we see,
Yes.
as examples of. But I think more recently, I think that we've seen hate crimes against Asian Americans, with the pandemic and all of that stuff going on with that. We've seen the number increase by 150%. I've seen all kinds of other statistics on that and everything, but the hate crime has significantly increased. And that's where we got to move away from that stereotype idea of that this is a hate crime and this is, that it has to be these groups and everything like that. And I think that we're kind of expanding some of those ideas out to encompass those areas.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you remember that incident where there was a man that was hitting or beating this old Asian lady?
Yep.
You still remember that? So that was that an hate crime?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
I think they
okay.
charge that as a hate crime.
Okay.
That's my understanding. I
Okay.
think that happened in New York, if I'm not correct.
Yes, New York.
Well,
It was New York. And there was another one that I think it was in Michigan, that a house of a Muslim family was burned down with the family in it.
Yeah. One of the things that I had on my PowerPoint that got deleted was there was an incident that the federal government investigated where a guy created a group called the White Squirrels, and they were they were about as racist as you could get. They didn't like African American people. They didn't like homosexuals. They didn't like Jewish people. They didn't like a large group of people. I think everybody kind of made the list. But so this guy created this group, and so him and two of his buddies decided they were going to hop into a car and drive to another state. They left their phones at the house because they thought, we don't want to get tracked. But so they left their phones at home and they drove to another state, and then they had a can of gas that was mixed with diesel fuel. And so they broke a window at a mosque. They threw this inside. And then the guy who created the group had also created a pipe bomb. He'd made a pipe bomb. And another one of the guys, the third guy, lit the pipe bomb, chucked it inside, caused it to catch fire. There were 7 worshipers inside, but the window they broke was an office window. So it was actually inside of a small office. So the building caught on fire. The people got out safely. Nobody was hurt, but they were charged with a hate crime. And I believe that the person who started the group and everything like that, I'm not sure if he's been sentenced yet, but he was looking at 35 years in prison because of that incident. The reason I bring that up was because the other 2 guys, including this guy, had also done some armed robberies and some other things, but they actually robbed the Walmart in Mount Vernon. And this was like 2017. Yeah. So they were real close here.
Close to home.
Exactly. And so I read that. I was like, oh my gosh, this is, interesting because I'm talking about hate crime, but I'm also, other crimes too, can get it rolled into that and everything.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Thank you. One last question, and then we can wrap up. When you were explaining the hate crime or hate incident, you said that sometimes when people make statements, you just cannot assume that it's an hate statement. Right. They have to be inflammatory. So could you kind of give us some examples, maybe 1 or 2 examples of what inflammatory words or phrases will be, considered a hate incident?
I think, like I said, when I gave the example of the guy at the bar with his girlfriend. Okay. So, he walks up to the second guy who's talking to his girlfriend and calls him the derogatory word for a slang for a gay male, faggot, and
Okay.
and punches him in the face, right? So from a law enforcement point of view, say, is that a hate crime? Does he really believe that person identifies with that group? Okay. I don't believe he does, because that, maybe he does, we don't know. Just from those sheer details, you couldn't get a conviction for hate crime on that, because there's not enough supporting elements, to make that association. But take that situation. So this person's coming out of a bar that is frequently, is a gay bar. He's coming out, and that person runs up and again says that. Now we have location and we have the language that goes along with it. So the derogatory language I'm talking about would be any derogatory term for another race, like Asian Americans. You hear the words, chink, slant eye, some of those type of things, which I've heard before. Being Asian American myself, which I didn't get into that, but so things like that. Is again, is it a crime to say it if you're standing on the sidewalk and there's no crime? Again, it's distasteful, unlike, but is it a crime? Not necessarily. Do I like it? No, I don't. It's, but again, as a society, as a free society with the First Amendment rights that we have, we always have to, especially us in law enforcement, we have to understand that we're walking that fine line. So.
Fine line, yes. And that's why it's been very, very difficult to address stereotype issues.
I'd like to talk about one more incident, if I can, real quick. So when I was actually still working for the city of Carbondale, myself and some friends of mine decided we were going to fly up to Minneapolis to watch the Minnesota Vikings play football. Okay, my buddies were big Minnesota Vikings fan. Me, I just love the NFL. I'm actually a Kansas City Chiefs fan, but they weren't playing, so that's all right. So we were flying out of St. Louis to go up there, and this was just a little bit after 9/11. Okay, I mean literally just a month or two after 9/11. So we get to the airport and we put our bags on the conveyor belt. Now I was not armed because I didn't take my gun with me, but I did take my badge. And so I laid my badge on top of my bag and put it on the conveyor belt and to go through. So the other three people, all white males, they walk through the metal detector and then, they get their stuff and they go on. Well, I walk through the metal detector and the guy there pulls me to the side and he wants to do the wand on me, even though he's off the metal detector. So he does the wand on me. He doesn't find anything. So then he pats me down and then he does the wand again. And he patted me down again. He does the wand a third time, and he was getting ready to pat me down again for the third time. And my bag came through, and my badge is on there. And the lady who's running the scanner, she says, "Are you a police officer?" And I said, "Yeah, we're all police officers," and we were.
Yes.
He was a son, and so he said, he goes, "Okay, well," he goes, and they said, "Well, you didn't even have to come through the check line. You guys could have went through the now I was profiled." Okay.
Yes.
I understand.
Yes.
I can appear, I can appear Middle Eastern and everything. I've talked to a lot of Middle Eastern people at SIU and everything like that, but I was profiled. Was it a crime?
Right.
No. Was it a bias incident? Absolutely, that was a bias incident, right?
Yes.
So I told that guy, I said, well, me and this guy are going to go have a cigarette because we've got to know each other so well. And he got mad and said, I guess he said, just move along. But it's like, in my mind as a police officer, again, because I've been doing it for a few years at that point, as law enforcement, we have to be careful with our interactions with people and how they're perceived and things like that. And so I've taken that incident. I've had other incidences that are kind of similar. So again, we just have to be sensitive to it. That doesn't mean we can't do our job, and that doesn't mean we can't investigate things thoroughly and get the job done. But we do have to be careful on how we interact with people, and that has been one of the things that I've always tried to do and tried to teach people, the people that I have field trained, things like that. And in my position now as chief, that is one of the things I model for my officers of how do we interact with our public, how do we interact with people. But that in and of itself, people will remember how you interact with people. And I've arrested people and had them coming out talking about what a great experience it was, things like that, just because I treat them with respect and courtesy and everything. I treat people the way I would want them to treat, my son, my daughter, my wife, my
Mhm.
father, things like that.
The
And I
the
do that.
golden rule.
Right.
Yeah. So you do, with bias incidents, you do a
Mhm.
lot of conflict resolution. Is
Correct.
that
Correct.
since you're
And
not
again,
going
it's hard, again, like you said, you talked about, people making statements and things like that. And you have to try to explain this person that is the victim of this, that, yeah, it's not pleasant, it's not palatable, but it's not a crime,
to,
and they say, well, the police aren't doing anything. If we could, we would, okay?
Mhm.
There's not a police officer I know that would want to, like the person in Virginia Beach. If I was there, I would do everything I could. Again, if the city attorney or the state attorney decides that they don't want to file on those charges, I've done everything I can do. Maybe they're not doing everything they can do. Okay. But again, if they say that it's not a crime under Virginia law, which maybe it's not, maybe the decibel levels aren't to the point that it's not a crime. But again, in Illinois, I think it definitely would have fallen into the criminal category and we could have charged, so, and that's the other thing too. You look at different laws in different states, different city ordinances and things like that. And obviously we're bound as police officers by those laws, which are created by the legislature, and those legislators are voted in by the people. So if we need to change the law needs to change. That's, something that we don't have control over. So.
Have you ever had a situation where you consider it a bias incident, but the victim is not happy and had to go through a different, maybe through lawsuit or end up in court?
I think that especially nowadays with civil law, I think you're seeing an evolution in civil law too. That case there, just, I think it just is begging for a civil lawsuit in some way, shape, or form. Put that in front of a judge and see what happens. I really do believe that there's more than enough evidence there, because it's not just that one person. It was their other neighbors too that were victims of this crime too. And so I really could see that being a civil lawsuit, even a federal rights violation at some point in time. Now, would the feds conceivably file on something like that? Yeah, probably not, because they tend to like bigger, serious, more, issues, than to put their resources towards something like this. But again, you never know. With enough media attention, if there was a bigger group that was affected by this, things like that, it's possible.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Wilmore. Thank you for a
welcome.
very informative and very helpful presentation. Thank you. And I'm glad that we are able to record it. So for those that could not join us, we have something for them to go and check out. Thank you so much for your time.
You're quite welcome.
It. Thanks.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Stop the recording.